I didn't feel old when I turned 56. I felt quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people talk about when they've made it. Not the earned silence of a man sitting on a porch, satisfied with what he's built. It was the kind of quiet that settles in when the noise slowly leaves your life and no one bothers to replace it. The kind where birthdays become reminders instead of celebrations. I woke up that morning before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. My wife was asleep beside me, turned slightly away, her back rising and falling in a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. For a moment, I wondered how many mornings like this I had left, how many times I'd wake up feeling useful before the world decided I was done. I didn't say that thought out loud. I've learned not to. Birthdays after 50 don't come with surprises. They come with polite smiles, half-hearted hugs, and conversations that end with, "We'll do something this weekend." Everyone means well. They just don't mean it urgently. I showered, shaved slower than I used to, noticed the gray that had stopped being an accent and started being the main color. I buttoned my shirt, tied my tie, and caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked like a man who had done everything he was supposed to do, and somehow still felt unfinished. Work was exactly what I expected: emails, deadlines, meetings where younger voices spoke louder and faster, and I nodded along because I'd learned that experience didn't always win arguments anymore. It just made you easier to overlook. Then late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my stepdaughter. We weren't close. Not hostile. Just distant in the way people become when too much history sits between them and no one wants to unpack it. I'd been there since she was 16. Old enough to resent me, young enough to still need things she never asked for. "Happy birthday," the message read. "Can I stop by tonight? I got you something." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. She'd never gotten me a gift before. When she arrived that evening, she didn't come in like she used to, dropping her bag, heading straight to the fridge, treating the house like a place she tolerated. She stood near the door, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, holding a small box like it might bite her. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. She handed me the box without meeting my eyes. "They're nothing special," she said quickly. "Just something I thought you might like." Inside were a pair of earbuds. But plain. Still sealed. I smiled because that's what you do when someone tries. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Her shoulders relaxed just a little, like she'd been holding her breath. "Just try them, okay?" she added. Her voice was too careful. Too rehearsed. I nodded. Of course. She didn't stay long after that. Left with a hug that felt obligatory and rushed. As the door closed behind her, I stood there with the box in my hand, wondering why something so small felt heavier than it should have. I told myself not to read into it. I've spent most of my life explaining things away. The next morning, I brought the earbuds to work. I didn't need them. That's the funny part. I already had a perfectly good pair at home. But something about using them felt like acknowledging the effort, like accepting the olive branch she'd never offered before. I put them in during a slow stretch in the afternoon, letting music fill the space where my thoughts usually wandered. The sound was clear. Better than I expected. For a few minutes, I forgot how old I was. Forgot the way my job had quietly edged me toward the margins. Forgot the strange tension in my stepdaughter's voice. I was just a man listening to music, doing his work. Then I noticed something. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. Just a faint, almost imperceptible click, like a static tick, every now and then. I adjusted the earbuds, assuming it was a bad connection. The sound stopped. Then came back. I shrugged it off. Technology glitches all the time. At least, that's what I told myself. During a break, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen of my monitor. Earbuds in. Shoulders slightly hunched. A man blending into the background of his own life. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt watched. Not in a paranoid way. Nothing dramatic. Just a mild, nagging awareness, like when someone stands too close behind you in line and you don't realize it until your skin tightens. I glanced around the office. No one was paying attention. Conversations hummed. Keyboards clacked. Life moved on. Still, I took one earbud out. The quiet rushed in. I laughed under my breath at myself. Get a grip, I muttered. I'd raised a child that wasn't mine. Paid bills. Fixed leaks. Held my marriage together through years of compromise and silence. I wasn't about to unravel over a pair of earbuds. But as the day wore on, I kept thinking about the way she'd handed me that box. The way she'd said, just try them, like it mattered more than it should. On the drive home, the earbuds sat in the cup holder beside me. I didn't put them back in. I drove with the radio off, listening to the engine, to my own breathing. That night, lying in bed, my wife asked, "Did you have a good birthday?" "Yeah," I said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. I stared at the ceiling again, the same way I had that morning. Only now, the quiet felt different. Heavier. Like it was waiting for something. I thought about my stepdaughter, where she was, what she was doing, why she'd suddenly remembered me. I thought about the earbuds, resting on the kitchen counter like any other object. And I told myself something I'd been telling myself for years. Don't make a problem where there isn't one. I didn't question the gift. I went to sleep believing that was the mature thing to do. I didn't know yet that silence, my silence, was already part of something much larger. And that by the time I understood what I was holding in my hands, it would be far too late to pretend it was just a gift. I didn't notice him watching me at first. That's the thing about people like me, we blend in so well that we assume everyone else does too. I was at my desk, earbuds in, half focused on a spreadsheet, half drifting somewhere between the music and my own thoughts. The office around me was its usual blur of muted conversations and fluorescent lights. Predictable. Then I felt it. That tightening at the back of my neck. The sense that someone was standing just a little too close. I turned my head and saw Mark. Mark wasn't the dramatic type. Mid-40s. The kind of guy who drank his coffee black, fixed problems without commentary, and avoided office politics like they were contagious. We weren't friends, exactly, but we respected each other. That quiet nod kind of respect. Except he wasn't nodding. He was staring at my earbuds. Not glancing. Not curious. Staring. I pulled one earbud out. "What's up?" I asked, keeping my voice light. For a second he didn't answer. His eyes flicked from the earbuds to my face, then back again. I watched the color drain from his skin, just slightly. Enough to notice. Enough to make my chest tighten. "Where did you get those?" he asked. Something in his tone made the hairs on my arms lift. "My stepdaughter gave them to me," I said. "Why?" He swallowed. "Can you come with me?" That was it. No explanation. No joke to soften it. I took the other earbud out and followed him to the break room. The door closed behind us, cutting off the noise of the office. Suddenly the space felt smaller. Too bright. Mark leaned against the counter, crossed his arms, then uncrossed them. He looked like a man trying to decide whether to light a match in a room full of gas. "Those earbuds," he said slowly, "you need to stop using them." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Come on," I said. "They're just earbuds." He didn't smile. "You need to take them to the police." The word landed heavy between us. "Police." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Mark," I said, lowering my voice, "if this is some kind of joke." "It's not." One word. Flat. Certain. My mouth went dry. "Why would I take earbuds to the police?" He shook his head. "I can't get into details here." "Then how do you expect me to take you seriously?" I asked. His jaw tightened. He leaned closer, just enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Because I wouldn't say this unless I was sure," he whispered. "And because if you confront whoever gave them to you, you could make things a lot worse." That did it. Something cold slid down my spine. "Confront who?" I asked. "Exactly," he said. "Don't." He straightened up, suddenly all business. "Take them home. Put them somewhere safe. And go to the police. Today if you can." I stood there, stunned, my fingers curling around the earbuds in my pocket like they might disappear. "This is crazy," I said. "I know," he replied. "That doesn't mean it's wrong." We walked back out into the office together. The hum of normal life rushed back in, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. Mark didn't look at me again. He sat down at his desk and started typing like nothing had happened. I sat at mine, heart pounding, ears ringing even without the music. I didn't put the earbuds back in. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Emails I didn't read properly. Meetings I barely heard. Every sound felt amplified. Every glance from a coworker felt loaded. I kept replaying his face in my mind. Though I'd seen fear before. Real fear. The kind that doesn't need words. On the drive home, the city felt louder than usual. Sirens in the distance. Tires on pavement. My own pulse in my ears. The earbuds sat on the passenger seat, separated, harmless looking. I thought about my stepdaughter. Her nervous hands. Her rushed exit. Her insistence that I try them. I told myself no. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions. I wasn't going to become one of those men who see threats everywhere, who mistake coincidence for conspiracy. But when I got home, I didn't bring the earbuds inside right away. I sat in the car with the engine off, the house dark and quiet in front of me, and weighed something heavier than fear. If Mark was right, then doing nothing meant choosing a side. And if he was wrong, then I was about to turn my family upside down over a misunderstanding. I finally picked up the earbuds and carried them inside like evidence. That night, my wife noticed. "You're quiet," she said as we cleaned up dinner. "Long day," I replied. She studied me for a second, then nodded. She's learned when not to push. In bed, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every memory of the day replayed itself on a loop. Mark's voice. "Take them to the police." I stared at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in from all sides, and realized something that made my chest ache. For the first time in years, I was afraid of what staying silent might cost me. And for the first time, silence didn't feel safe anymore. The next morning, I put the earbuds back in. I told myself it was curiosity. That if there was really something wrong with them, I needed to understand it before I panicked. But the truth sat heavier than that. A quieter truth. Part of me wanted proof that Mark was wrong. I needed the world to go back to the shape I understood. At my desk, I slipped the earbuds in slowly, like I was bracing for something to bite. Music filled my ears, soft, familiar, comforting. For a few minutes, nothing happened. No clicks. No static. Just sound. I almost laughed. "See?" I told myself. "You're fine. You're letting your imagination run ahead of you again." Then I heard it. Not a sound in the music. The sound behind it. A faint, irregular tick. Barely there. Like someone tapping a fingernail against glass from the other side of a wall. It didn't follow a rhythm. It didn't repeat predictably. It just appeared. Then vanished. My shoulders tightened. I pulled one earbud out. The sound stopped. I waited a few seconds, then put it back in. The tick returned. My heart picked up speed, and suddenly the office felt too quiet, like everyone had stopped breathing at once. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching me. No one was. Or if they were doing a good job of pretending not to be. I forced myself to keep working. Numbers blurred on the screen. Words lost their meaning. Every noise, chairs scraping, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, felt amplified, like the world had turned the volume up just to see how I'd react. Every sound felt like a test. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way the earbuds warmed slightly in my ears after a while. The way the left one seemed to click more often than the right. The way the tick sometimes came right after I spoke under my breath. That thought made my stomach drop. I stopped talking to myself. At lunch, I sat alone, earbuds still in, pretending everything was normal. I watched my coworkers laugh and complain and scroll through their phones, all of us sealed inside our own small bubbles. For the first time, I wondered how many secrets were moving through this room unnoticed. I thought about my stepdaughter. About the last time we'd argued, years ago now, over money she swore she'd pay back. About how I'd let it go because it was easier than being the bad guy. About how often I'd chosen peace over clarity. I told myself that was kindness. Now I wasn't so sure. The more I listened, the more memories surfaced. Her sudden interest in my job a few weeks ago. Casual questions about what I did, who I worked with, what kind of information I handled. At the time, it had felt like small talk. Now it felt like a pattern. My chest tightened with something sharper than fear. Responsibility. If Mark was right, if these earbuds were doing more than playing music, then this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about what I might be carrying into places that trusted me. About conversations I didn't even realize mattered. I imagined myself as a weak link. The thought made my jaw clench. I removed the earbuds and placed them carefully on my desk, like they might react to sudden movement. Without them, the office sounded flat, distant, unreal. I didn't put them back in for the rest of the day. Driving home, I replayed every interaction with my stepdaughter over the past few months. Each one took on a new tone. New weight. I wondered how long she'd been planning this, or if she even understood what she'd handed me. That night, after my wife went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet in the way it only gets after midnight, when even the walls seem to listen. I placed the earbuds in front of me. They looked ordinary. That's what scared me the most. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, the same way I always did when I needed to think. I thought about the kind of man I'd spent my life trying to be. Steady. Reliable. Not dramatic. The man who didn't overreact. But there was another kind of man I'd avoided becoming. The one who asked hard questions. The one who risked breaking things to protect what mattered. I realized then that this wasn't just an identity crisis brought on by age. It was a test I'd been dodging for years. Did I want to be liked? Or did I want to be responsible? I packed the earbuds back into their case and slid them into a drawer. Not hidden. Just contained. Tomorrow, I told myself. I'll decide tomorrow. But even as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I knew something had shifted. Once you start hearing what you've been ignoring, you don't get to unhear it. And no matter how quiet I tried to be, the question followed me into the dark. How much damage had silence already done? I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of fear, not the kind that makes your heart race, but because of memory. The kind that lines itself up quietly and waits its turn. I kept seeing her at 16. Standing in the doorway of her bedroom with her arms crossed, daring the world to tell her what to do. Her mother behind her, exhausted, already choosing the path of least resistance. Me in the hallway, holding a list of rules I never fully enforced. I told myself back then that patience was strength. That being calm was maturity. That if I didn't push, things would work themselves out. Somewhere along the way, patience turned into avoidance. Calm turned into silence. And silence became the language our family spoke best. I lay there in the dark, listening to my wife breathe, and wondered how many lessons I'd taught without ever meaning to. In the morning, she made coffee like she always did. 2 mugs. No questions. We moved around each other with the quiet coordination of people who had learned how not to collide. You heading in early? She asked. Yeah, I said. Got a few things to take care of. It wasn't a lie. Just incomplete. At work, I avoided the earbuds entirely. I kept them in the drawer, unopened, untouched. But their presence felt louder than when they were in my ears. Every time I reached for a pen or opened a file, I was aware of them sitting there, waiting. Waiting for me to decide who I was going to be. I found myself watching people instead of working. Watching how they spoke. What they shared. How easily trust moved through the room. It struck me how fragile it all was, how much of our lives depended on the assumption that no one was listening when they shouldn't be. Around noon, my stepdaughter texted. Hey, everything okay? You didn't mention the earbuds. I stared at the message for a long time. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Yeah, I finally wrote. They're fine. 3 words. That's all it took to keep the lie alive. The realization made my stomach turn. I wasn't just protecting her. I was protecting myself, from conflict, from discomfort, from having to admit that I might have misjudged the girl I helped raise. That afternoon, I left work early and drove without a destination. The city blurred past my windshield, familiar streets suddenly unfamiliar. I passed schools, parks, neighborhoods where other men were living versions of the life I thought I understood. I wondered how many of them were carrying something they didn't want to look at. I pulled over near a small park and sat there, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. I thought about the man I believed I'd been. A provider, a stabilizer, someone who didn't rock the boat. Then I thought about the man I'd actually become. Someone who avoided hard conversations. Someone who confused peace with responsibility. Someone who let things slide until sliding became normal. I remembered a night years ago when she'd come home late, eyes red, voice sharp. I'd known something was wrong. I'd felt it in my bones. But I'd said nothing. Teenagers, I told myself. The memory burned. That night, at home, she stopped by again. Unannounced. I heard the knock and felt my chest tighten before I even stood up. When I opened the door, she smiled, too quickly, too brightly. "Hey," she said. "Just wanted to check in." She stepped inside like she belonged there, like nothing had changed. She talked about work, about a friend who'd let her down, about money being tight. I nodded at the right moments, offered neutral sounds of support. All the while, my eyes kept drifting to her hands. They fidgeted, just like they had when she was younger and hiding something. "So," she said casually, "you like the earbuds?" There was. The question hung between us, fragile and sharp. "Yeah," I said. "They're good." She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Good," she said. "I'm glad." For a moment, I thought she might say more. Confess. Explain. But she didn't. She finished her drink, hugged me quickly and left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the empty space she'd occupied. I realized something then that made my throat tighten. I had spent years trying to be the man she wouldn't rebel against. And in doing so, I'd failed to be the man who would stop her when it mattered. Later that night, my wife asked, "She seems okay?" "She always does," I said. The words tasted bitter. In the quiet of my study, I opened the drawer and took out the earbuds. I turned them over in my hands, studying the seams, the smoothness, the way they gave nothing away. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. In her. And in myself. That was the hardest part, realizing that this wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the result of years of small choices. Of boundaries not drawn. Of lessons not taught. I sat there until the house went still, until even the refrigerators stopped humming. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation would be about emotion. About accusations and denial. About protecting egos. What I needed now was clarity. I placed the earbuds back in the drawer, locked it, and slipped the key into my pocket. For the first time in a long while, silence didn't feel like avoidance. It felt deliberate. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending that being a good man meant being a quiet one. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth. And whatever it cost me, I would finally act like the man I should have been all along. The police station didn't look like I expected. There were no flickering lights. No stern faces waiting behind glass. Just a low building with beige walls, a flag out front, and a parking lot half full of ordinary cars. The kind of place you drove past every day without thinking about it. I sat in my car for a full minute before getting out. The earbuds were in my jacket pocket, heavier than they had any right to be. I told my wife I was running an errand. She hadn't asked which one. We were good at that, giving each other space where questions might lead to answers neither of us was ready for. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and old paper. A desk officer looked up as I approached. "I need to speak to someone," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "About?" I hesitated. Then I reached into my pocket and placed the earbuds on the counter. "These?" I said. "I think there's something wrong with them." He didn't laugh. That was the first confirmation. He picked them up carefully, turning them over like he'd done it before. His eyes flicked to a colleague across the room, just for a second. A look passed between them, quick, practiced. "Have a seat," he said. I sat. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time did something strange when I stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. A woman in a plain jacket approached and introduced herself. No badge flashed. No last name offered. Just a calm voice and eyes that missed nothing. "Can you tell me how you got these?" she asked. I told her. Not the long version. Not the emotional one. Just the facts. Birth, fifth, stepdaughter. Concern. She nodded as I spoke, occasionally jotting something down. When I finished, she picked up the earbuds again and said, "Did you use them?" "Yes." "How often?" "2 days." Her pen paused. "Did you notice anything unusual?" I thought about the clicking, the timing, the way my skin had crawled. "Yes," I said, but I didn't know what it meant. She studied my face for a long moment. "You did the right thing coming in," she said finally. Those words landed harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say them. She explained just enough to make the truth impossible to ignore. The earbuds weren't just modified, they were sophisticated, designed to activate under specific conditions, capable of capturing more than audio, part of a larger investigation that had been quietly unfolding for months. I wasn't the target. I was the access point. The room felt smaller. "Am I in trouble?" I asked. "No," she said immediately. "You're cooperating. That matters." I nodded, absorbing that. "Who gave them to you?" she asked. "My stepdaughter." She didn't react, but she wrote that down. They asked me to leave the earbuds with them. Asked me not to discuss the visit with anyone. Asked me to go about my routine as normally as possible. As normally as possible. I walked back to my car feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I wasn't crazy. Heavier because the story I'd been avoiding was now official. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "You okay?" I stared at the screen, then typed back. "You were right." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Good," he finally replied. That's all I needed to know. At home that evening, I watched my wife move through the kitchen, folding herself into the rhythms of dinner prep like she always did. I wondered how many secrets a marriage could hold before the weight changed its shape. "How was your day?" she asked. "Productive," I said. Another incomplete truth. Later, alone in the study, the drawer sat open and empty. The key still warm in my pocket. I felt exposed without the earbuds there, like a guard had stepped away from a post I hadn't known existed. I replayed the officer's words in my head. "You're cooperating. That matters." For most of my life, I'd measured myself by how little trouble I caused. How smoothly I moved through the world. How few waves I made. This was different. This was about choosing to step into something messy because not stepping in was worse. That night, my stepdaughter texted again. "Hey, random question. Did you bring the earbuds to work today?" My chest tightened. There was the proof I hadn't known I needed. I typed slowly. "No," I wrote. "Why?" Several minutes passed before she responded. "Just curious." Curious. I set the phone face down on the desk and leaned back in my chair. I felt a strange calm settle over me, not relief, not satisfaction, but clarity. The truth was no longer something I had to chase. It was already moving. I wasn't angry at her. Not yet. What I felt instead was a quiet grief for the version of our relationship that had never been honest, and for the man I might have been if I'd learned sooner that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. I turned off the light and sat there in the dark, letting the weight of what was coming settle in. I knew now that the next few days would change everything. Not because I planned to act, but because I already had. The hardest part wasn't fear. It was pretending. The police told me to act normal, to go to work, to come home, to respond when spoken to. They said routine was important, not just for the investigation, but for me. As if routine could somehow carry the weight of what I now knew. 3 days. That's how long it lasted. 3 days of silence that felt louder than any argument I'd ever avoided. On the first day, I woke before my alarm again. The ceiling looked the same as it always did, but I didn't. Something in me had shifted, like a joint that no longer moved the way it used to. At breakfast, my wife talked about groceries and bills and a neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking at night. I nodded at the right moments, answered when spoken to, smiled when expected. I wondered how many marriages survive on this exact kind of performance. "You okay?" she asked finally. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." She accepted that. Or chose to. At work, I kept my head down. I didn't talk more than necessary. I didn't linger near anyone's desk. The absence of the earbuds was a presence of its own. Every conversation felt exposed. Every word felt heavier now that I knew how easily it could be taken. Mark passed by once, slowed just enough to catch my eye, then nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. The second day was worse. That was the day she came by the house again. I heard her car pull into the driveway while I was in the study. My body reacted before my mind caught up, muscles tightening, breath shallow. I stood slowly, reminding myself that panic was the one thing I couldn't afford. She came in like she always did, dropping her keys on the counter, opening the fridge without asking. "Hey," she said. "You got a minute?" I followed her into the kitchen. She talked about money again. About a job lead that hadn't worked out. About how unfair things felt lately. Her words spilled out fast, like she was afraid silence might invite questions. I listened. That was the hardest part, listening without reacting. "So," she said eventually, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Did you ever figure out that weird sound you mentioned with the earbuds?" My heart thudded. I kept my face neutral. "Must have been interference," I said. "Haven't really used them much." She watched me closely. Too closely. "Oh," she said. "That's probably smart." Smart. The word echoed in my head long after she left. That night I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling and counted the small sounds of the house. The pipes cooling, the refrigerator humming, the distant rush of traffic. Each noise reminded me of how much information we give away without realizing it. The third day felt different. Quieter. Like the air before a storm when even the birds seem to know something's coming. At work, I couldn't focus at all. My hands shook when I reached for my coffee. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Around noon, I got a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for your cooperation. Please continue as discussed." No signature. No explanation. I deleted it immediately. On the drive home, I passed the same park where I'd sat days earlier, wrestling with myself. This time, I didn't pull over. I already knew the answer to the question that had haunted me then. That evening, my wife noticed the tension I'd been trying to hide. "You're carrying something," she said softly. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. I wanted to tell her everything. To let the truth fall between us and see if it shattered or held. "Soon," I said. "I promise." She nodded, eyes searching mine, then let it go. Later, alone in the living room, I sat in the dark and waited. Waiting is its own kind of courage. It requires restraint. Trust. The willingness to let events unfold without trying to control them. For most of my life, I'd waited because I was afraid to act. This time, I was waiting because I had already chosen to. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. A single line of text. "They're on their way." I didn't ask who. I didn't ask where. I sat back, closed my eyes, and took a slow breath. Whatever happened next would hurt. But it would be honest. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. When the knock came, it wasn't loud. That surprised me. No pounding. No shouting. Just a firm, measured knock that carried more weight than noise ever could. I stood from the couch slowly, feeling every year in my knees, every decision in my chest. This was it. I opened the door. They were already there. 2 officers, calm, composed, dressed in plain clothes. Behind them, parked along the curb, were 2 unmarked cars. No lights. No spectacle. My stepdaughter was in the driveway. She'd arrived minutes earlier, unannounced, pacing near her car with her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw the officers, her voice cut off mid-sentence. Her eyes found mine. In that moment, I saw everything she'd ever been with me: defiant teenager, guarded young adult, someone who had learned early how to test limits without crossing them too far. Confusion flickered across her face. Then fear. "Sir," one of the officers said quietly, "we're going to need to speak with her." He didn't look at me for permission. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't ask me to point. They already knew. She turned fully toward me now. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Why are they here?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. For years, silence had been my shield. My way of avoiding discomfort. My way of staying liked. This silence was different. This silence was restraint. The officers stepped closer to her, voices low, controlled. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. I saw the moment it landed, the exact second the ground shifted beneath her. Her shoulders stiffened. Her jaw tightened. She looked back at me again, eyes wide now. "You said you liked them," she said. Her voice cracked just slightly. "You said they were good." I swallowed. "I said they worked," I replied. It wasn't an accusation. It was the truth. One of the officers gently took her arm. Not rough. Not forceful. Just enough to make it clear this wasn't a conversation anymore. "Wait," she said, panic finally breaking through. "Wait, this is a mistake." She pulled her arm back and looked at me like she expected something. A defense. An explanation. A rescue. For a split second, the old instinct surged. Fix it. Smooth it over. Say something to make this easier. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because this wasn't my mess to clean. This was the consequence of years of choices, hers and mine. As they walked her toward the car, she stopped struggling. Her steps slowed. Her head dropped. "Why?" she asked softly, not to the officers. To me. The question hit harder than any accusation. I took a breath. "Because I finally stopped pretending nothing was wrong," I said. That was all. They placed her in the back seat. The door closed with a solid, final sound. One of the officers turned to me. "Thank you," he said, "for handling this the way you did." I nodded. The cars pulled away quietly, leaving the street exactly as it had been before. No neighbors came out. No curtains moved. It was just me, standing in my driveway, with the echo of a choice I couldn't undo. Inside, the house felt different. Larger. Emptier. My wife stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself. "Was that?" she began. "Yes," I said. She searched my face, then nodded slowly. She didn't ask for details. Not yet. She stepped forward and rested her head against my chest. I felt the weight of her trust settle there. Later, alone in the living room, I sat in the same chair I'd been waiting in hours earlier. The quiet returned, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one didn't accuse me. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed. I thought about the man I'd been at the beginning of the week. The one who believed staying silent kept everyone safe. I understood now how wrong that was. Silence doesn't protect. It just delays the moment someone has to face the truth. And tonight, the truth had finally spoken for itself. The house didn't feel broken after they left. That surprised me. I'd expected wreckage. Shattered silence. The kind of emptiness that echoes. Instead, there was a calm that settled in slowly, like dust after something heavy has been moved. Not relief. Not peace. Clarity. The next morning, I woke later than usual. Sunlight pushed through the curtains in a way I hadn't noticed in years. My wife was already up. I could hear her moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds anchoring me to the ordinary. Ordinary felt different now. At the table, she slid a cup of coffee toward me and sat down across from me. She didn't rush. Didn't soften her expression. She waited. "So," she said. I told her everything. Not defensively. Not dramatically. Just honestly. From the gift to the police station to the knock at the door. I didn't try to justify myself. I didn't ask her to understand. She listened. When I finished, she stared into her coffee for a long moment. "I always wondered when it would catch up to her," she said quietly. The words landed gently, but they hurt all the same. "I should have done more," I said. She looked up at me then. "We both should have," she replied. "But you did what you could when it mattered." That was the closest thing to forgiveness I needed. Work returned to normal faster than I expected. No one said anything. No whispers. No sideways glances. Mark passed my desk one afternoon and stopped. "You holding up?" he asked. "I am," I said. And this time, it was true. He nodded once and moved on. That was it. Life has a way of moving forward even when you think it shouldn't. Weeks passed. There were meetings with lawyers I didn't attend, Questions I wasn't asked to answer, consequences I didn't get to control. My stepdaughter didn't reach out. I didn't expect her to. I thought about her often, not with anger, but with a kind of sadness that comes from recognizing someone's path too late. I stopped replaying the moment in the driveway. Stopped wondering if there was something I could have said differently. Some choices don't come with better versions. They just come with endings. On my 57th birthday, there was no gift. And somehow that felt right. My wife and I went for a long walk that evening, the kind we used to take before life filled every quiet space with obligation. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. At one point, she squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you didn't try to fix it," she said. "So am I," I replied. Later that night, alone in my study, I opened the drawer where the earbuds had once been. Empty. I sat back and let myself feel it all. The grief, the disappointment, the relief, the strange pride. For most of my life, I'd measured myself by what I gave other people. Stability. Silence. Sacrifice. That year, I gave myself something different. I gave myself permission to stop carrying what wasn't mine. I gave myself honesty, even when it cost me. I gave myself the understanding that being a good man doesn't mean being an invisible one. It means standing still when the truth moves past you, and not stepping in its way. I turned off the light and sat there for a moment longer, listening to the quiet. This time, it didn't ask anything of me. It simply reminded me that I was still here. Still responsible. Still capable of choosing who I wanted to be. And that, finally, was enough.